Took me 6 hours to figure out this hat. So today I'm going to be working on the map that Mabel turned into a little hat. To start this out, I'm going to be using a regular sheet of computer paper, and while that paper is still wet, I'm going to sprinkle on extra coffee grounds. In doing so, I'm going to get a very unique texture to this piece of paper. And although I had a very similar technique for the blend and blend-in page, adding this additional step, it's going to look like two entirely different pieces of paper. So while I wait for that to dry, let me show you this right here. This is the actual map for the Special Edition Journal 3. There are some unique issues that I'm running into. If I try folding this into a paper hat, this is the problem I run into. And I'm going to keep this footage pretty slow just so everyone can see how I'm folding this. Although the front of the hat looks decent, the back doesn't quite reach the bottom of the hat, so this doesn't quite look right. So the problem here is the map is too wide. It needs to be more narrow. So to fix this, I'm just going to go ahead and fold the inside part, creating a little channel in the center. But this also comes with a unique problem on its own. You can see right here, that's how the little channel is going to look. And this is where we start having our first problem. Because there's an additional fold, all the creases are extremely difficult to straighten out, and it's getting a little more difficult to fold each time. The next issue I'm seeing is the north arrow and the little structure on top no longer line up, but this can be easily fixed. If you just redraw that north arrow, redraw the structure, it'll be a little off from the original, but it will work. And those two issues can be easily overlooked, especially since the hat actually works. You can see here on both sides it lines up really well. So this is where I start having an issue with this hat. Although it works, there is a strange little slit down the center where that lip meets up. And I personally just don't like that. Now if we look at the original hat, we don't have that issue there, but we do have that back part issue. So I'm just going to have a modified version of this map. Now originally the map is an 8x5 by 11. That's going to be your standard paper size. Now if we check out the paper that I folded in the center, that's around 2¼ of an inch, or 2.25. So in order to have my map work, I'm going to need a paper size of 6¼ by 11. And because I'm working with the constraints of my journal, I am going to size that down even further. So this is my modified map. Now this map took me probably a little too long to figure out. I did have to move the drawings around a little bit just so that everything has a nice spacing, but it's essentially the exact same thing. For this drawing, I'm almost going to be using the entire set from all the way from 005 all the way up to that brush pen.
Dude, I just bought these!
So once I have everything laid out the way I want, I'm going to come in with a little bit of gouache paint. This is just so I can further weather the page. Now I could just stop here. I do have a nice texture, but I do want to push this even further. But I need to be really careful because I'm working with a really thin piece of paper here, and this can easily break. So using just a regular hairdryer, I'm going to go ahead and force this paper to dry a little quicker, just so that I can continue working. Now that I've added all the additional distress, I'm going to go ahead and add in all the red parts. Now the reason I waited until now to do it is because the red smears really easily, and I need to have a very controlled environment so that I can take advantage of that smear. And then right here, I'm just going to add an additional splash of red. And now we can go ahead and move on to the writing. Now I have very little space, so I'm going to have to write extremely small for this. And I'm going to do that as well for that red text in the bottom. So this is where it's going to get tricky. I want that red to also be smeared a little bit like the other side, but I need to be really careful. If I let it stay wet for a little too long, the words will completely disappear. So I'm going to have the hairdryer already on before I'm even wetting the page. That way I can have it dry almost instantly. That'll still give me the smeared look without ruining any of the text. Now because I added a lot of distress to that red, I'm also going to want to add something to that black. So just using a little bit of a brown acrylic, I can go over all the lines and mucky up those details a little bit. So now that we're done with that, let's go ahead and start folding this into the actual hat. Now I want to be really careful here because every line is going to be extremely prominent, and I don't want to have any unnecessary folds in here. And again, I'm going to keep the footage pretty slow here just so you can see how I'm folding this. So we're almost done. I do want to clean up that center line right there, just so that clean paper doesn't poke through. Now I'm not really too concerned with distressing the entirety of the back side, but we can add it just to the center, just where it's going to be poking through. I'm pretty happy with how the hat came out. It looks pretty nice. You can see all the symbols relatively easy, and everything does line up pretty nice. And it's almost a shame that I had to unfold this. I felt it was necessary to turn this into a paper hat so that when I have it sitting inside the journal, it has extremely accurate folds. And so now we can actually work on the first Mabel drawing. Let's start out by weathering the page, and I'm going to add 2 layers of wash to this. The first one is just to get a nice dirty color in the back, and the second wash is going to be to try to match the previous page. That way I have a uniform look to the two. Now inside the official release, the map is almost outlined and has like a dirty look to the outside of it, but I don't want to use my map for that. So I'm just going to make a little template and use that to add that outside shadow.
How old do you think this thing is?
So the technique I'm going to use here is I'm going to add pen as the base, and then I'm going to follow it up with a little bit of color pencil.
I finally bought a sharpener.
What this will do is it'll give me a base to work with, so I don't have to add as much color pencil to the top. This will also add an additional layer of texture to all that color pencil and make it look a little more interesting to look at. Now the Mabel drawings are not too difficult, but you do have to keep in mind that this would have been drawn by a child, so you need to keep everything really messy. That includes not having any clean line work, color dropping out of the lines, and having line work go over multiple passes. Now, I'm going to assume that all the outlines were made by a marker, so I'm going to limit myself to only using the brush pen. That way I get a really nice thick outline. And very similar to the drawing, all the text is going to be done with a pen, and then I'm going to follow that up with a color pencil. This will just help make all the line work look a little fuzzy. And then I'm going to use a red Sharpie on the side right here, and the camera doesn't pick it up, but it does look red in person. Now I'm going to go ahead and write out the whole message from Ford, and what Ford is basically saying is he has a few ideas of what this map is, but he can't quite figure it out. Now I've seen a few concerns about how I'm going to tape the map into the journal without making it quite permanent, and it's a pretty easy solution actually.
I forgot to add the little cuts on the top.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a piece of tape, and I'm just using some regular Scotch tape. And using my t-shirt, I can actually pick up a little lint off the shirt, and this will remove a little bit of that stickiness of the tape. It'll still hold inside the journal, but as long as you're really careful about it, you can actually remove it still without damaging the bottom page nor the map itself.
Yeah, check that out.
That way I can remove it at any time and I can turn it back into a little hat. And by taping it this way, I can still open it up without having to remove the tape. So there is one thing I did change. The tape that I originally used was really opaque, and if I want to keep the theme of Dipper using a clear tape, like I used on the Blend and Blandin page, I'm going to also have to repeat that here as well. But other than that, easy fix. And I would say this page was extremely successful. The map looks really nice, and I really like how the Mabel drawing came out as well.
Look what I accidentally made while I was weathering the page. It kind of reminds me of a